Good afternoon from the second age of reason. It looks as though America is waking up. They've been asleep for so long, and now they're waking up. Finally, they're waking up. Who is waking up? Everybody. Everybody who calls themselves a 99%. And so, I've watched this thing develop, having been a child in the 60s, which is also a very active time. And now, having been sleeping for so long, the citizens are starting to notice certain things. So, let's start our discussion here about what they've been noticing. They don't know what they've been noticing. Well, a lot of them are unemployed, and that's unfortunate. And so they're probably protesting that. I think they have a whole list of grievances. I think they're right. They've seen those grievances and they're valid. And they've decided to protest. And that's right. And so they've taken to the streets to demonstrate and to lay out their grievances, which is okay. But as you watch these things unfold and they're spreading across the land, you have to wonder, where does it end? What is the conclusion? What is the goal? I mean, it's the same thing if you have a war. You have to define, well, what does it mean to have victory? Or what does it mean to be defeated? And once you've defined that, then you know where to go and what your goals are. And I hear them say certain things, certain goals, and it doesn't seem very coherent all the time. And so, I mean, listen, some people say, oh, we just want our money back. What money? Define it more specifically. I mean, free money for everybody sounds nice, but it's not specific enough. And it's not going to be a good goal to look for. You need to look at what you've lost and what you want back. In the past, what worked and what didn't. And then you need to get everybody on the same page and say, well, you know, we can't get everything perhaps, but we can get some very important things, which will set the groundwork and get our toe in the door so we can move on with more things in the future. So I've kind of put together a little list. I mean, that's the first thing anybody should do. After you've had your list of grievances, you need to make your list of demands or expectations. All depends how you put it together. I've noticed also some people, those rallies can get pretty loud. A Fox journalist goes through and gets harassed quite a bit. And I know there's a certain satisfaction that comes in harassing somebody who seems to support the very richest and the causes of the problem. But I think it would be better if we reached out to them, if we showed them our better side and brought them into our way of thinking, and that would further isolate the source of the problem. But by harassing them, you just make them feel like martyrs, and they'll point back at you and say, what a bunch of uncivilized, unruly peasants. And so my concept is, perhaps if you reach out to them and pull them into your way of thinking, there'll be more to your advantage. Now, there are some things that we've noticed over time, and here's what we would want to say. We want to return to some constitutional rule of law. Things like the Department of Homeland Security, and the Patriot Act, and TSA have gone a great ways to compromising on constitutional rights. And so we need to ask for those rights back. The rights of free speech, the rights to assemble, the right for redress of grievances, the right to due process in law. A lot of those things have been short-circuited for convenience sake. And you could say you want justice. Okay, so the wars are unjust, so Wall Street's profiteering off of the entire world economy is a sort of robbery, but over the past 10 to 20 years, they've changed all the laws so that even if you did get them into something to try and charge them with it, they've made it all legal now anyway. So you need to start reversing the damage that has been done. In that regards, we had a law in America from the time of President Roosevelt called Glass-Steagall, which set up certain criteria for banks in order to properly manage their money and not get into trouble. So I think the first thing we need to do is reinstate Glass-Steagall and start enforcing it. A lot of times they'll have laws and they won't enforce them, and it's as good as not having a law at all. So Glass-Steagall, bring that back. That's one big step in the right direction. Another thing that's been kind of let go of recent years or decades has been antitrust issues. The banks are becoming too big to fail because nobody's concerned about antitrust anymore, about monopolies. So the banks have gotten so big and so interconnected that the whole world's economy is now in grave danger. And I think if something is too big to fail, it's too big to exist. And so they should immediately go about breaking these things up into smaller, manageable pieces, totally independent and disconnected from each other. And then they can all compete on the same playing field. Another issue is the stock market. The stock market is the jobless recovery. I think a lot of it is by means of something called flash trading, where computers buy things at immense speeds, buying and selling. And there's something else that makes that profitable, is that money can be borrowed at almost 0% interest. So if they would raise the interest rates for borrowing, investment borrowing, just a little bit to a few percent, that would mean they would have to maintain that purchase until it earned at least that many percent profit to be worth selling. Secondly, you can slow it down. You could just say no flash trading. You could say all trades must be done in person with a handwritten signature. And you could say that all trades, when you buy them, have to be held for 1 year before you'd be eligible to sell them. So that would slow the whole thing down a whole lot. Now, if you didn't want to do that, you could turn it into a revenue stream as well, even though it's probably a fake revenue stream of sorts. If you would simply put a 1 or 2% sales tax on all Wall Street stock investment transactions, derivatives, bonds, all that stuff, if you would put a 1 or 2% sales tax on it, when they're trading millions of shares per second, individuals, you multiply that by thousands or millions of brokers, you're talking a fair chunk of change, and it's coming from the wealthy who can afford it. And if they are making sound investments, there should be no problem with it, should there? So you need to say, well, here's another demand. Either no flash trading, or we want to see a sales tax, and that will help fund the United States government. Another part of it is that people think that their representatives in government have been bought and paid for by the big corporate interests and lobbyists. Well, that's something else you could push for. You could push for that donations are only from human persons, not from corporate so-called persons. And that way you would limit it to, say, $100 or $1,000, a finite amount, and everything would have to have a receipt. And that would prevent them from being too beholden to interests. Or you could make it so that everyone would get a candidate grant, which would enable anybody, even Joe the plumber, to run for office, even to presidents, and he'd have the same media exposure as any of the other millionaires or billionaires. And they could then go forward based on the merit of their argument and their debate, not just on how many commercials they can flash at you and saturate your mind and consciousness with that particular candidate. The way that the whole system has been tilted towards the military-industrial complex, and perhaps that's the only part of America that's really manufacturing a lot of stuff, but I would still think it's a death-based economy, and perhaps if we had shifted our emphasis away from military and more towards human and well living, it would be a better world, better society. We don't need to be spending so much making enemies all around the world and maintaining this stuff. I mean, you can say specifically, Iraq, we should just close up that war, pack up our bags, give them a couple $1 million and say, you win, and walk away. Whatever you want, You have to package your expectations and let them know what they are. And they need to be something that is material and substantial that can be accomplished. The other thing to be careful of, I've noticed there's a lot of chanting. The human microphone is interesting. It's a nice way to amplify stuff, but it has a certain property to it. You may not realize this, but I think it has a spiritual aspect to it. It's very much like being in a church and having prayers or chants. And I can see where it gives you a sort of psychic energy and a power and a momentum, and you're excited. But just be careful, it doesn't divert you into other things. It can distract you from the task at hand. Just as long as you stay in charge. Also, co-opting. I think you need to realize that the Democrats and Republicans of the same party, they're just different methodologies. They have different financial interests. And if a Democrat would come along and support your movement, that's nice, and they can come and march with you. But don't let them co-opt you into saying that you are a Democrat protest, a Democrat demonstration, that you belong to them in any way, shape, or form. Because what you represent is something different. You represent the people, individuals, and you need to keep it on that plane. Because once you've been, taken over by a given party, then you kind of become their tool and toy, and they can get you off your course. So those are just some advices that I give to you at this point. I wish us all luck in this endeavor, but you have to be aware that you have the grievance, you've made your point with the protest, and now you have to give them a tangible expectation. What do you expect? Do you expect Social Security to be secured? Do you expect wars to be spun down and de-emphasized, and perhaps converting the Obamacare into single-payer health care? And how does that work? It's up to you to decide and codify it and request it. You can write your congressman. I write to mine, and they do reply to me eventually. They don't always understand, but that's the first step. I mean, you have to give them a chance, and then we'll take it from there. So, basically, the message is just start thinking about what you want, because the protests are now being taken seriously, and people are listening, and they're going to want to say, well, we want to clear this protest out. We don't want it to get any bigger or worse. We want to what do you need? What do you want? Maybe it's something that's not so big. Maybe it's just, you know, the way they've cracked down on lemonade stands. Maybe you want to have that. Maybe you want people to be able to grow their own food, or raise cows, or if they want to have unpasteurized milk, or if they want to grow cannabis. Just tell them that's what you want, and have the government get out of their face. They say, well, because you're planting stuff in your garden, you're a farmer, and you're come under farmer's law. Well, then you say, well, maybe we have too many farmer's laws. So, like I said, look over what you want, because they're going to come and they're going to eventually say, what do you want? And you need to say that clearly. I've rambled on long enough now, so until later, we'll be seeing you.